I am making my first ever Warhammer army. Welcome to Goblins. I am going to make a completely custom Orcs and Goblins Warhammer Fantasy army. It's going to be whimsical and dark and inspired by 70s and 80s fantasy movies. Labyrinth, The Dark Crystal, Neverending Story, The Last Unicorn, The Hobbit movie. You get it. I want the army to have that cheesy, kind of creepy, kind of janky, but sincere vibe. Just everything I aspire to be myself.
You remind me of the babe.
So, why am I now making a Warhammer army? Well, it's inspired by my trip to AdeptiCon. I had no intention of going to AdeptiCon. In fact, 5 days before AdeptiCon, I didn't know I was going to be going. So I'm going to AdeptiCon. I bought my plane tickets yesterday. I fly out in 2 days. Super last minute, I decided to go. I was on a call with some friends who were working on their projects, and I said, I want to go to AdeptiCon. And then they said, you should go to AdeptiCon. So I'm going, and I'll show you around and stuff, but I'm losing my mind. I'm freaking out. I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, so let's fucking go. The whole thing was an absolute whirlwind. I got to hang out with all my hobby heroes. I got to meet some of the coolest, nicest people and see the craziest looking games being played. And in that week of Adepticon, I didn't play a single war game. Now, if I didn't play a single war game, then how did this trip inspire me to make an army? I'll get to that, but first I've got to talk about my friends. This trip was only possible because of my friend Elle. Elle took a crazy chance on me. She let me stay in her hotel with her. We didn't know each other super well. Luckily it worked out and we became best buds. Having Elle there the whole time made the trip so much better. Also, she's an awesome artist and you should go check her out, and she made this monstrosity for Adepticon. And then there's Trent. Miscast, you know him. Trent is one of my biggest inspirations, and I got to hang out with him all week. He is the best, which is great, because if he sucked, I'd be really sad about it. I am constantly re-inspired by his videos, and he just brings an artful, unique perspective to the hobby. I don't want to gush about him too much, because now that I know him, it's kind of embarrassing. It's been a dream of mine to work with Trent on something, but now that we're friends and I can ask him, I'm not going to, because I know he'd say yes. Trent is awesome. He wants to support as many people as he can, work with all his friends, do everything all the time, which makes him so busy, and I'm not going to add to that. I'm sure we'll work together someday, but in the meantime, I'm going to make a series inspired by his Nurgle Diaries series. This will be my army building series. So again, if I didn't play any war games, then why did this trip inspire me to make an army? Well, at the con, I met some of the coolest, most talented, lovely people. And though I didn't play any traditional war games, I did play a lot of games. I got to play Jeremy's game Idols of Torment, Bill's game Mech 28, Jamie's game Siren's Watch. There are so many creative people and unique artistic voices that are all brought together by this hobby. So I want to contribute my artistic voice to this community, to this hobby. I also love having a reason to make stuff, and knowing that I can make a bunch of different creatures that all go together to fit into one giant art project that I can also play with is just the best thing I can think of. Also, I can use the creatures and goblins in a D&D game. I can let the D&D game inspire the lore for my Warhammer, and the Warhammer can inspire my D&D, and that's awesome. So that brings me to Goblins. What is Goblins? Goblins is a D&D setting that my partner came up with. It is a fantasy world filled with goblins and only goblins. To me, goblins can be kind of anything. I feel like they can have beaks, or scales, or fur, or bat noses, or long noses. As long as you can draw a little creature and go, that's a goblin, then to me that's a goblin. One thing about Warhammer that really bothers me are the homogeneous, clone-like goblins and orcs. I want my critters to look wildly different. I want them to be different sizes, all coming together to create one giant army of chaos. So while I'm building this army, I want to play D&D in this world. The PCs from the campaign can be integrated into the army, maybe they're generals or something. I want the monsters that the players defeat to join the army, and just all that lore gets integrated into the army. I think that's going to make this army really fun and special to play. I have never played Warhammer. In fact, I've never played any wargame before. Some of my favorite artists make Warhammer stuff, and I love minis, but no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get into the aesthetics of 40k. My friend Scott used to paint Warhammer as a teen, and I would look at his Space Marines and I would just think, nah, that's not for me. Growing up, I liked knights and dragons and monsters and pirates, and as a 30-year-old, I like that stuff more than ever. So when I saw the armies from the old world, I thought, oh yeah, that's something I can get behind. I love the Bretonnians, the squat dwarves, the Tomb Kings, basically all of them. I knew as soon as I saw this setting that this was the game I was going to play, but I didn't know where I wanted to start. I started to really get into old Warhammer fantasy models, Trish Carden's work in particular. I wanted to make my own giants and goblins and trolls and all that kind of stuff, and lucky for me, that all falls under the category of an Orcs and Goblins army. As I delved deeper into old Warhammer models, I started to really get a taste for the aesthetics of it. I got a deep appreciation for metal minis, and I even started to like things that I didn't like before, like banners and old Warhammer aesthetics. I am coming at this brand new. I have no preconceived notions of what an army should be. I have no nostalgia for any of this stuff, and I think that's a good thing. Obviously, most people making Warhammer content have been in the hobby for a long time, but I think having a fresh new perspective and encouraging people to get into the hobby for the first time from someone who is getting into the hobby from the first time, I hope I inspire a few other people to do the same. This also means I'm going to need a lot of help. I don't know the rules, I don't know how to build an army in the point-buy system, but besides that, I also want your help with ideas. I want this to be a community-based project. I want your ideas on creatures and lore and names and all that. Also, my patrons are guaranteed to get their ideas into my army. So comment down below if you have any ideas or suggestions for my army, and if you join my Patreon, one of your ideas will be guaranteed to get into my army. I have a lot of ideas for what I think the army will look like, and I'm anticipating those ideas changing as I go, but here are some of my ideas. Orcs. We're talking leather, we're talking straps, we're talking skulls, we're talking horns. That sounds like a metal band to me. I want to make orcs inspired by 70s, 80s glam rock metal fashion. Leather, bandanas, scarves, mullets, fluffy hair, crop tops, animal print. I want them to look cheesy and a little slutty as well. I made my first mullet orc at AdeptiCon. I sacrificed this guy to the meat grinder. I also got to fight in the meat grinder against Rick Perry, which was just a cool coincidence. Seeing a mullet on an orc makes me laugh so much. Whenever I sculpt something that I don't like, I just add a mullet to it, and suddenly it's my favorite thing in the world. So that's going to be the inspiration for a lot of my orcs. Orcs just look like the metalheads that I know, so I'm just going to lean into that. And then we've got goblins. Goblins, to me, are that part of your brain that just wants to scream and cause mischief. They are disgusting and terrible and wonderful and happy and sad, and I just want my goblins to look like they're in distress but loving it. But yeah, starting an army is a really big project. The whole thing began when I bought a lot of Orcs and Goblins old 90s metal minis on Facebook Marketplace. It was a really good deal. I got a bunch of them, a lot of really cool models in there. The whimsy of these models is off the charts. Some of them are so perfect that I don't need to add anything to them. They are perfect as is, and I'll just paint them up. Others I'm going to crank things up a little bit, make them a little bit sillier, give them a little more character. The star of the lot was this beautiful old metal wyvern. The guy gave me 2 left wings for it, but I think we can all agree that dinosaurs are cooler when they have feathers, so let's scrap those old wings and see if we can't give it something a bit more badass. I used this Sphinx in my D&D game. She has served her purpose, so she is being sacrificed for this project. If I'm going to give him feathery wings, I need to give him a little beak to match, make him as birdy as possible. I don't know if people are gonna like this. The original rider for this wyvern is cool, but doesn't really fit anymore. So I'm gonna find a goblin that I think fits this a little bit better. This guy just looks like he's having the best time, so this is gonna be my rider. I'm gonna make this guy look a little birdy, give him a beak and some hair, make him look like he fits the wyvern a little bit better. The whip for molding purposes was a little bit janky, a little bit small, so I cut it off and I made my own whip using guitar string. I also cut off his other arm and gave him a new arm to hold some reins. I don't have reins yet, but I'll get to that eventually. I painted this in really bold colors. I really liked the bright, kind of pastel, cartoony colors I used in my last project, and I wanted to continue that with this one. With this mini, for the first time, I can see a crossover between my oil paintings and my mini painting. Some of the color choices and techniques resemble some of my oil paintings, and that's really exciting. It's nice to see my 4-year degree finally come in handy. I'm excited to see where I go with mini painting. I'm still painfully slow, but I'm starting to get the results that I want. I feel like I learned a lot with this project. I know I wasted a lot of times repainting the wings when I could have just layered on the colors, but I think personally I need to just try and figure things out for myself rather than learn techniques from others. That's going to help me retain more and find my own painting style. So, who else is joining the party? This is Turnip Baby. I made this mini for the King of the Hill Giant contest on Instagram from Hill Giant Games. I actually got to meet the Hill Giant game guys at AdeptiCon as well. We made some stuff together for a new game that they're making, and I sent them home with a few new friends, including my mutant orc. So, what's the story with this giant? In Goblins, hill giants grow in hills of great battles, absorbing the bloodshed as nutrients. They sprout leaves when they are close to maturity, testing if the weather is right for their birth. Sometimes they are mistaken for crops and are unearthed early by mistake. Other times they run out of nutrients and pull themselves out of the ground. They are fueled by their unending hunger and wander the hills in search of food. As long as the goblins feed the giants, they will serve as destructive forces in their army. Next we've got the Goblin King. I have a video on how I made this guy. Born an unnaturally large goblin, he was appointed king, fed endlessly and worshipped as a god by the goblin horde. His gluttony, combined with his belief of divinity, made him mutate, growing lesions throughout his body that scarred into scales and horns. The magic of collective belief altered his form until he resembled a mighty dragon. I'm thinking this guy could maybe count as an Azhag. I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. And then we've got trolls. Now I think this is probably too big to fit in my army. Let me know if I'm wrong about that though. I might convert it to be a little bit more orky if that's the case. I sculpted new faces onto this troll. I also cut off his hand and replaced his hand with a dino claw. And then I took off his foot and replaced it with his old hand. I don't know if I'm going to use this model in my army, but it was a good proof of concept for the kind of trolls I could make. At some point I want to do a whole video on trolls. I really want to do my own take on the troll hag, as well as a few other ones like the river trolls and the rock trolls and all that. Let me know if you'd like the troll video to be next in the series. I've got a lot of ideas and a lot of work to do. This is going to be a long series. I think some goblin terrain is necessary. I want to do a video about weird mounts because there's no way goblins only ride wolves. That's crazy to me. Let me know what you want the next video in this series to be. Join my Patreon if you want your ideas directly integrated into my army, and let me know if I've gotten something terribly wrong or I've done something that you hate. Also, like and subscribe because I'm just getting started and I want you to come along for the ride. Bye.